Many of them simply had no understanding of what was going on. After all, many of them did not even speak Arabic. Others did not realize the gravity of the situation. After all, this was the Kaaba, the holiest place on earth. So who could possibly assume that anyone would try to do anything to taint its sanctity and image? But a few people immediately realized the fanaticism that was slowly unfolding before their very eyes, including the Imam of the Haram. He immediately disguised himself in the crowd, and 3 days later, when Juhayman let the women and children out, he managed to sneak out of the Haram along with them, and he was one of the primary sources that the authorities could rely on to understand what was happening inside of the Haram. For 8 days after this announcement, the followers of Juhayman held the Haram itself hostage. No one was allowed to leave initially, and those who were trapped inside were held hostage until finally, when food ran short, Juhayman was forced initially to let the women and children out and eventually the men out as well. But Juhayman and his own followers sealed the doors of the Haram shut, and they barricaded themselves in the underground basement of the Haram. The Tawaf, the only perpetual act that Muslims continue to do non-stop for hundreds and thousands of years, stopped. Even the congregational prayer was not called. Juhayman had posted snipers on the minarets of the Haram. Instead of calling the people to prayer, the minarets were used to shoot and murder any guards who dared approach the Haram. The Muslim Ummah was stunned. Was it even conceivable that a group of Muslims take the Haram itself hostage? At the same time, many people, including some students of knowledge and even ulama, were confused. Could it be possible that this person might actually be the Mahdi? After all, some of the signs had really and truly been met. A person had sought refuge in the Haram, that was one sign. His name was Muhammad, another sign. The son of Abdullah, yet another sign. He was from the Quraysh, another sign. Allegiance was indeed given to him between the black stone and the station of Ibrahim, as the Athar and the Hadith predicted. No matter how remote the possibility, the question lurked in the minds of these people. What if this really were the Mahdi? For if it were, the Prophet ﷺ also told us how, towards the end of time, an army will march towards the Haram in order to attack someone who had sought refuge in it, and that the earth itself should swallow up that entire army and destroy them. What if this were the Mahdi, and any army they sent would be the very army that the earth would swallow up? After deliberating over the call of this alleged Mahdi, and the various signs that the hadith had predicted he would have, and also taking into account the tactics that this group was using to spread their call, the Lajnat al-Da'ima of Saudi Arabia, the highest council of senior scholars, issued a fatwa, a religious verdict, stating that these people were renegades and that it was permissible to launch an offensive attack against these rebels in order that the Haram be rid of them. Based upon this fatwa, commandos, armed with plans devised by military experts and strategic analysts, stormed the Kaaba, equipped with tanks, hundreds of military personnel, and other assault weapons. In the shade of the first house ever built on earth for the worship of Allah, the house of Allah built by the Prophet Ibrahim, an armed combat ensued. Both sides exchanged fire. The intricate layout and architecture of the Haram proved to be advantageous for these rebels. For every pillar became a shield behind which they could hide, and the multiple floors of the Haram proved to be a veritable maze. The sacred mosque became a war zone. Many people were killed, including the supposed Mahdi himself. It is unclear how he died. Some rumors have it that he was killed by some of his own followers when he realized that this was a gross mistake and wished to turn himself in. In any case, when the supposed Mahdi died, many of his followers realized that this could not possibly be the Mahdi, and with his death, they surrendered themselves to the forces. Others, including Juhayman himself, who was the actual ringleader, fought on, using tear gas, throwing in smoking tires, and other ammunition. The commandos who stormed the Haram tried to extricate Juhayman and his core followers, but they had taken shelter in the basement of the Haram, and they were not able to bring them out. Finally, as a last resort, they flooded the basement of the Haram with water and threw in live electric wires. Having no option, Juhayman and his followers, battered and bruised, covered in smoke and soot, surrendered themselves. Photographers managed to capture images that still bring chills and shivers to those who look at them to this day. 61 people were caught alive. The rest, over 100, died in the battle inside the Haram. All of these 61 were soon executed in cities all around the kingdom. This incident brought to the attention of the entire world, Muslim and non-Muslim, a concept that had hitherto been neglected or sidelined for many years, that of a being called the Mahdi. What exactly is this concept of the Mahdi? Is it a superstition borrowed from other religions? Or perhaps some type of myth that Muslims have invented? A type of knight in shining armor that we use in order to excuse our own apathy and indolence? And what about the ramblings of a heretical and unorthodox group who believe that a Mahdi has been alive and hiding in a cave for the last 1200 years, secretly controlling the world and biding his time to leave? Perhaps the Mahdi is merely a figment of the imagination concocted by these groups. And finally, this figment made its way to Sunni theology as well. The answer to these questions and more is the topic of the present series of lectures.